So in this video we're going to take a look at a lesser known speech from Shakespeare. It's the speech by the Earl of Warwick when he dies at the Battle of Barnet in the play Henry VI Part 3, Act 5, Scene 2. Now if you like classic books and literature and Shakespeare, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so that you don't miss out on any of our book reviews or on anything linked to classical literature. The Earl of Warwick's death speech isn't one of the most well-known of Shakespeare's speeches, and yet it has some of the greatest poignancy. This is particularly brought home by Shakespeare because he uses big characters. The Earl of Warwick in this situation is known as the Kingmaker because he is the most powerful magnate in the whole realm. And through the play of Henry VI, he struts and swaggers across the stage. So to see him suddenly all blooded and messed up in a field of battle and ready to utter his last words, we suddenly recognise that ambitious Warwick, what did his life amount to, even if he accomplished great things? And that strikes us. So let's get into the play. In the scene just before this one, the King Edward and the Earl of Warwick have had a bit of a banter back and forth with each other, and Warwick said, "I'm off, I'll see you at Barnet where we'll do battle." Now in the actual Battle of Barnet, Warwick is chased down and done in by a bunch of knights. And now we hear the Kingmaker, ambitious Warwick, suddenly realise the shortness and futility of life. Okay, are we ready? Act 5, Scene 2. Warwick. Ah, who is nigh? Come to me, friend or foe, and tell me who is victor, York or Warwick? Why ask I that? My mangled body shows, my blood, my want of strength, my sick heart shows that I must yield my body to the earth, and by my fall the conquest to my foe. But what's he actually saying? Well, remember, he has now been hacked down, he's dying, he's all messed up. And so he's lying there, the battle's been raging, and he hears someone nearby, and he says, "Who is nigh? Who is near? Come to me, whoever you are. You can be a friend, you can be on my side or the enemy. Just come to me and tell me who won the day. Did York, that's King Edward, head of the House of York, or Warwick?" But then did you notice his next comment? Why ask I this? Why do I bother asking? I know who's won. And how does he know? He says, my mangled body. So twofold meaning this. My mangled body shows who has won. Because he says, why ask I this? Who won, York or Warwick? My mangled body shows who won. But it's got that very grim idea of my mangled body shows maybe he's got horrendous wounds and parts of his body are open, real bad flesh wounds. Then he says, my blood, my want of strength, my sick heart shows. So I've got horrid wounds, I'm covered in blood, I've got no strength, I can't stand up, I can feel my heart getting slow, I've got no energy. All of this shows who has won. And then he says that I must yield my body to the earth. That means I die. I give up my body to the earth. And by my fall, the conquest to my foe. He's saying with my fall, the battle is lost. But he also feels a lot about himself because he says the conquest. Now that's the whole war, the War of the Roses. Warwick believes himself to be so important that he thinks with his fall, the House of York inevitably will win the whole war. It gives you an idea of the vaunting ambition, the grandiose sense of self that Warwick has. So now he carries on. Thus yields the cedar to the axe's edge, whose arms gave shelter to the princely eagle, under whose shade the ramping lion slept, whose top branch overpeered Jove's spreading tree, and kept low shrubs from winter's powerful wind. So again, speaking of his greatness as the Kingmaker, did you see? Thus yields the cedar to the axe's edge. The cedar. Now, specifically biblical terminology, the cedar is the greatest of the trees, thick-trunked, often extraordinarily high, and it can be felled by an axe, which obviously is a lot smaller. And so Warwick is saying, I, the great Warwick, have finally succumbed to the axe's edge. I've been hacked down. However, he seems to be playing on a biblical scene. The reference he's talking about is found in Daniel chapter 2. And in it, the Babylonian king sees this immense tree, a cedar, and its branches are in the tops of the heavens. And under it all the wild beasts gain shelter, and in its branches the birds seek a haven. Well, what's Warwick saying? He says, well, I'm the mighty cedar that's fallen. My arms sheltered the eagles. Under my shade the ramping lion slept. Now what's interesting is there's two heraldic images here. He's showing his dominance over other nobles. The eagle, which is often emblazoned as a symbol for various houses, and the ramping lion, so the lion rampant. That's when you see the lion sideways on, like that, on a shield or on a banner. He's saying they rested underneath me, the great cedar, and suggesting that this is a little nod towards the vision in Daniel. He says, whose top branch overpeered Jove's spreading tree. Jove, almighty god. Jove is normally Jupiter of the Greek gods, but it can be used as an expression for mighty god. And in the vision, this tree was able to be seen from the whole earth. And so he's saying that my top branch overpeered Jove's spreading tree. I mean, Warwick really feels that he is powerful. And the truth is, he is powerful. And yet look at him here. Shakespeare is deliberately putting these words in his mouth to make us realise that he has got to almost the summit of power, and yet what's happened? He's lying there. My mangled body shows, my blood shows, my want of strength and my weak heart shows that I've had it. Let's carry on. These eyes that now are dimmed with death's black veil have been as piercing as the midday sun to search the secret treasons of the world. Well, he's still thinking upon his former greatness. These dimmed eyes, they're dimmed with death's black veil. The light is fading from his eyes because he's dying. Remember, there was someone nearby. He says, who's nearby? Come to me, friend or foe. He couldn't see them clearly, but he said they have been as piercing as the midday sun. You can't stare at the midday sun. The midday sun will also search out all the shadows. In fact, at noon, there aren't shadows. And Warwick saying, I used to be the political mastermind who could see every treason against the king, and I would act for that king. I was the greatest politician. I knew everything, and now here I am with eyes dimming. He says next, the wrinkles in my brows, now filled with blood, were likened oft to kingly sepulchres. For who lived king but I could dig his grave? And who durst smile when Warwick bent his brow? I really like that. That's very glorious speech. So can you imagine he's dying here, and imagine the frown on his head, the pain that he's in. That's what he's saying. He says, these wrinkles in my brow, which are now filled with blood because he's been battered, have often been likened to kingly sepulchres, graves. You know, the wrinkles in your brow are like little tracts in the land, little cuts where you can deposit a body. He says, these wrinkles in my brow have been like kingly sepulchres. Now that's interesting. I can inter a king in death in my frown. So Warwick saying, I am the kingmaker. When I frown, I could bury a king in these wrinkles. And that's actually what he says, for who lived king, but I could dig his grave. In fact, he is the only person in history to simultaneously hold two kings captive. He had Edward and Henry at one point, and he could decide who to make the king, hence the nickname Kingmaker. So, what kings ever lived that I couldn't dig his grave? And he says, who dares smile when Warwick bends his brow. So what that means is, imagine the court of all the nobles, the great magnates of England with their own powers. Who dares smile if I frown at him? I am so scary. When I frowned, people didn't smile. My gaze could bury a king. So he's given this majestic picture of his own glory. He's almost reached the top, overpeering Jove's spreading tree. And yet, almost unbelievably to him, here he is lying, dying, and his side has lost the fight. Now the recognition comes in on the vanity of life. And this is where we're touched. Lo, now my glory smeared in dust and blood. Lo means look. But it's got that long O to its look. It's pregnant with thought and realization. My glory, all that I've accomplished is now smeared. So imagine something polished up, a beautiful golden cup or trophy of some kind. It's now smeared with dust and blood. It's ugly. It's no longer something to be desired. It's useless. It's lost its lustre. All of Warwick's power has no lustre for him now. It's no ornament to him now because it's been cut down. And then he observes the waste of material things. My parks, my walks, my manners that I had, even now forsake me. And of all my lands is nothing left me but my body's length. Isn't that beautiful? Doesn't that touch you in your heart? He's saying, all my parks. The Earl of Warwick had loads of castles all over England. He had whole forests that were his. So he's saying, all that land, all the beautiful walks that I had, that I could enjoy, and all the manors, the stately buildings, everything I had, he says, they all forsake me now. Those parks and manors, they can't come to Warwick's aid as he dies at the edge of the field under a tree. They can't give him back his dimming sight. They can't give his heart strength. They all forsake me. All the things I've accumulated just fritter away. Warwick is having that realization brought in upon him. All the things I had. Can you imagine all them flicking through his mind? His various castles, people he knew, friends, walks, parks, hunting grounds. They've all forsaken me. And then what does he say next? And of all my lands, which would have been thousands of acres and huge amounts of buildings and stately homes and castles, of all my lands is nothing left me but my body's length. Of all the thousands of acres, what does Warwick, and in fact Shakespeare is saying, what do any of us, even if we're the richest in the world, actually have when we die, but the outline of our body? Where that lies in the earth, that is all that is left to us. And Warwick has just said, I who am the great Cedar, this majestic tree, the one who could make a king, the one who could scare the most powerful magnate with a look, the one who heraldic emblems of other families were beneath his shade, the ramping lion and the eagle in his branches. All I have is 5'8" of space that I can actually call mine. Makes you pause for thought, doesn't it? It's why Shakespeare's so good. He strikes at the human condition. We are all vulnerable and we are all pathetic in the front of time. It gives us a faint sense of mortal dread. Now let us take a look at the last two lines of Warwick's speech. You'll notice something about these two lines. Shakespeare does this regularly when one of his noble characters is giving a monologue. And it's a rhetorical device. It may seem cheesy, but it actually really imbues speech with a memorable power. See if you can spot what it is. Why, what is pomp, rule, reign, but earth and dust? And live we how we can, yet die we must. Did you see the rhetorical device that's used? And you'll see it in many other speeches. The rhyming couplet. Must and dust. But what is he saying? All of his life he's devoted himself to pomp. That pomp is glory and honour with all the outward show, all the fine garments, all the gold, all the beautiful buildings, all the parks and walks and manners. What is pomp? And rule. So in some respects he had power and reign. Shows his design was on the crown. He would never take it for himself. He wasn't legitimate, but if he could marry his daughters into the royal family, then his descendants would get the crown. But now that he's dying, he's saying, what is all of that but dust and earth? All the kings before him are just dust and earth. They're all dead. It reminds us of Richard II, who says, within the hollow crown sits death, keeps death his court. And Warwick is realizing, we may go for the stars, but what is it in the end? He uses the word we in the next line, the last line, meaning everyone, not just him, but every person in the realm, from the highest to the lowliest commoner in a hut in a turnip field. Yet, and live we how we can, however we live, die we must. And all are equal, because at the end, don't all remain with just the length of their body as their possession. What a beautiful speech. Now let's just read through, and now that we know what it means, let's just enjoy Warwick's discussion of himself as a great man and the sudden realization that at death, everything he did means nothing. Ah, who is nigh? Come to me, friend or foe, and tell me who is victor, York or Warwick? Why ask I that? My mangled body shows, my blood, my want of strength, my sick heart shows, that I must yield my body to the earth, and by my fall the conquest to my foe. Thus yields the cedar to the axe's edge, whose arms gave shelter to the princely eagle, under whose shade the ramping lion slept, whose top branch overpeered Jove's spreading tree, and kept low shrubs from winter's powerful wind. These eyes, that now are dimmed with death's black veil, have been as piercing as the midday sun to search the secret treasons of the world. The wrinkles in my brows, now filled with blood, were likened oft to kingly sepulchres, for who lived king but I could dig his grave, and who durst smile when Warwick bent his brow? Lo, now my glory smeared in dust and blood, my parks, my walks, my manners that I had, even now forsake me, and of all my lands is nothing left me but my body's length. Why, what is pomp, rule, reign, but earth and dust? And live we how we can, yet die we must. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you stick around to listen to more of Shakespeare's speeches and monologues analysed on this channel. And of course, I'll start making videos on characters. So if there's any part of Shakespeare or classic literature that you would like me to cover, please put a comment down below to let me know what it is. And together we'll try and make this a place where we can get some real good conversations going about the classics and really good writing and really good speech. Because we think in words, and the better we can form our words, the more colourful our life.